All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, out there digging and crunching and scraping and looking and climbing the highest peaks and swimming the deepest oceans to find the best talent and good stories for you out there in the world. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing someone who is now sort of like a brother cousin to me through our integration of companies. I got Matt Malloy from EWI, formerly known as Edison Welding Institute. Matt, how's it going?
Hey, good afternoon, Max. Doing great. How are you?
Good. I am 33 degrees in the sun here, Celsius in Regina, Saskatchewan. So I'm going to punch that into I am at 92 degrees Fahrenheit where I live. So
holy cow.
She's supposed to be warm. We're supposed to get up into almost 40s this week. We're a part of that heat wave that's going up through central US. It's coming up into our area here. So
yeah, we were really warm for a while. Right now it's about 75 today. So I think, like 20, 21, 22 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius.
That's room temperature. It's like,
oh, it's perfect.
So, you at work today? How's it going, Matt?
I have, yeah. It's going good. Yeah, I'm sitting here actually right above our high bay, one of the main labs here we've got at our building here in Buffalo, New York. So things are going good, doing some automation stuff. It's been a fun day. Good week so far.
Perfect. So to kick off the conversation, let's talk a little bit about what it is that you do right now, just so people understand, and then we can kind of work our way, backwards from that. Because I have you here as a automation program manager, right?
Yep.
So what is that at EWI, and what is it that you do on the daily?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, first of all, the EWI does all kinds of applied research and development. So we do things across from, welding, forming, joining, ultrasonics work. Over here, and a lot of that's at our Columbus, Ohio site. Here at our Buffalo, New York site, we do a lot of automation work, data science, metrology, metal additive manufacturing research. So we work in quite a few areas. Our automation program is I'd say it's a lot of fun. That's the program that I'm in. We do a combination of research and development, as well as what I like to describe to people as work that's a lot closer to manufacturing today. So we do everything from, developing cutting-edge telemanufacturing technologies, which allow you to control robots from a remote distance and get real-time haptic feedback as if you were right there, to helping small and medium manufacturers figure out what to automate, how to automate it, and help them get their first systems going and help train their people and everything in between. So it's really a pretty broad spectrum in our automation program.
So when you are talking about creating programs for manufacturing, and let's dial in on that. That's a lot of my background. And as a group, the people that are working with you, your facilities, your lab, do you wait for the request to come in, work on that request, give a solution or try to give some type of a solution? Or are you constantly working on a list of things that, your team has decided that these are the things we should work on, and then push those out into the industry?
Kind of in the middle. So if you take the first part of it, we certainly do have companies that come to us. They know what we do, right? So they'll come in, they'll ask us to help them with stuff, and we love doing that. But a lot of it is us going out, finding those local companies, finding those small manufacturers, engaging with them, right? And then jumping in, helping them figure out what to do. But we're also doing a lot of development on our own, which is, I think, the second part of what you were asking. Mm-hmm. And so that's a lot of that is around, automated welding, automated machine tending, automated inspection, the types of things that we hear a lot of requests for, right? So those things we're picking are picked based on kind of all the requests and the insight we're getting from those manufacturers.
And how do you prioritize what you're working on? Is it based off the equipment you have? I mean, requests are going to come in for things that you don't have, obviously, and there's going to be stuff that you can, like, low-hanging fruit. We have that. Oh, hey, this is similar to a different project or whatever,
Yeah, that's a very important question. And it's with so much fun stuff to work on, that can get a little bit hard, right? It's easy to get sidetracked on something, and we're heading down a path. Hey, we're developing what we think is the right thing to do, but we have all these other priorities. So the team has gotten really good at kind of getting together, prioritizing on those, so we know we're focusing on the right combination. And it really is, we'll say a good mix of customer work and internal research and development. But it's taken a while, I think, to get to the right balance. But I think we're there now.
Yeah. And when you think of, we had this conversation offline last week, I think. People think of the Edison Welding Institute, you think of welding.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and the CWB is going through the same thing, where this field has expanded and broadened across the horizons in so many directions that now EWI is an organization, and what you're doing, how much of it is welding and how much of it is material handling, value stream or flow through the shop, shop design,
Yep.
all these things that lead into having successful manufacturing facility.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, EWI is no longer just a welding company, a welding organization. It's still a huge part of what we do. But our automation team actually is working in a lot of different areas. There's more non-welding work right now going on, helping these manufacturers figure out what to do and how to do it than there is welding work. So I at the sake of alienating myself with your audience, I will say I have no welding background. So I'm have just recently started welding, and it's one of these things that now that I've done it a few times, I'm really wishing I would have done it when I was younger. It's a lot of fun. But
hey, you can always come. You can always join the team, buddy. Like
I know I'm slowly starting to head in that direction. But yeah, we do a little bit of everything. So if you were to come here to our Buffalo site, you'd see very little welding. You'd see everything about all the other stuff you mentioned, the automation for material handling, for machine tending, for all these different things. If you were to go to the Ohio site, you'd see all kinds of welding, right? Manual welding, automated welding, really cool projects going on over there around not just telemanufacturing, but like arc TED, wire metal additive manufacturing with robots. There's just some amazing technologies being developed across the company.
And what are the pieces of technology that you find yourself working with the most? When you're looking at working with clients, and and this happened to me lots in manufacturing. They focus in on the weld. This is the machine that we need to do the welding. Can we replace, this welder or welders in a cell with a machine? But there's a lot of steps that lead up to that point, and even a lot of steps after that point. And a lot of companies sometimes don't realize that going to automation increases your workload in terms of people. And that's there's a lot of studies that are out now that saying automation actually increases the number of people you have to hire because your capacity is going to increase. So what are the pieces of technology that you find yourself working with the most? Is it the robots, the cobots, the conveyor systems, the imagery? I mean, I can think of a million things, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's so many toys, right? I'd say the biggest thing for the last few years has been things around cobots or collaborative robots, right? Robots that are meant to be safe to work around. We're seeing those just be adopted everywhere. But the biggest thing is beyond even just the safety, it's the ease of use, right? So you could take someone who has no robotic background and very quickly teach them how to do the basics with a collaborative robot in ways you would not have been able to do with a typical old school industrial robot. So that's where we're really seeing a lot of interest and where our team is focusing very heavily. Also, with most of the companies that are coming to us asking us questions, that's what they're asking about.
Now, is it trendy? Do you see this being, like a bit of a growth right now because of the trendiness of it? Everyone's thinking Jetsons. We're gonna have this robot follow me that's gonna just do all these things that I want it to do that I don't want to have to be chasing somebody down for. Or do you see it as a very sustainable model until the next invention?
Sure. I've thought about that a lot over the last few years. I think a few years ago, if you were to ask me that question, I would have said yes. It's probably kind of a bit trendy, and I know there's some very vocal people in the industry that think and always will think that it's just a fad, right? It's just something that everyone wants to do. But I think we've seen enough evidence right now to say no, it's not. In fact, even on the industrial side, people are trying to take cues from the collaborative robot space and say, all right, how do we make these easier to use? How do we make them safer to work around? I think some of the other things that you might think about is collaborative. When you see these videos of humanoid robots, robots that look like people walking around doing stuff, I would have to argue that that's probably a bit more on the trendy side.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to really see much of a use case for something like that, beyond just being able to show that you can do it. So I think there's it's going to take a while before we see where that heads.
Yeah. Do you see cobots replacing the space of robots, which seem to be at this point in our timeline to be more like the heavy duty
Yeah,
workers? The robots they're static, they're based, and
yeah,
they're there to pump things out. Whereas, and correct me if I'm wrong, cobots I see more as the on the job helper.
yeah, yeah. No, I think they are going to replace a lot. It just depends on what the application is. So things around welding, for sure. There's a great fit for collaborative robots in welding. Things in general, shops, fab shops, assembly, tending equipment, absolutely. The biggest drawbacks with robots is the payload and the reach, right? So they
Mhm.
can't lift as much, they can't reach as far, and generally they don't run as fast, right? So if you're talking, you've got something that has 1 second cycle times, or you need to lift, 100 kilograms, it's not going to be a collaborative robot application. So those are going to stay industrial robots. And there's not really much of a need to push the collaborative robots into that space. But for all
Mhm.
the day-to-day stuff that we see in a lot of factories, a lot of fab shops, absolutely. I think you're going to see it keep getting more and more introduced.
Let's go back now. Like, we got a good base of what you're doing. You're going into work. You got these teams. You're working with clients, industry, and you got robots, cobots, manufacturing. But I mean, to get to that point in the workspace, you got to do some hard time out there in shops, and I know because you kind of work your way up, whether you're a welder or not. You don't get to the cobots overnight, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, and maybe the next generation will, because now it's in universities and colleges.
Oh, yeah.
But coming up, it was a lot of hands-on stuff. So how did you get into this being a non-welder?
All right. Yeah. So certainly a much different background. In fact, my background wasn't in robotics either. So my background was, say, about 15 years in the semiconductor industry. So all semiconductor and nanotech work. So when you think about next generation computer chips, right? What's gonna power your phone 5 years from now, 10 years from now,
Hmm.
your tablet, whatever other crazy devices there are out there. That's the world I lived in. About 7 years ago or so, I got an opportunity to move back to Buffalo, New York, which is where I'm from, and work with a startup company. So we manufactured laptops and tablets right here in Buffalo, which, manufacturing that directly in the US itself was pretty rare. We
Hmm.
did it right here. That was really my first entry in robots. I ran our advanced manufacturing programs there as well. Um, we got started going down this path of collaborative robots. And actually, I worked with a team here at EWI to develop this really cool system. So we had one dual arm. So think of a robot with 2 arms, helping put screws into these laptops. And we had 5 people sitting around each of the cells. So 5 operators would work basically hand in hand with this robot. It works awesome. It worked so good that we invested in 2 more full systems. So we had 3 of these, 15 people. To your point earlier on, it actually helped us bring in more people because as we were
Hmm.
ramping up, we were able to hire more. Um, Unfortunately, as a lot of startups do, it shut the doors one day. It was a super exciting place. I think about it all the time. But the door is shut, and I do had a lot of good connections here. We worked really closely together for the few years leading up to that, and so I got a really good opportunity to come jump over here to BWI right at the same time that they closed. And it's a very easy transition, and slowly we were working in our kind of automation slash advisory team. Uh, and it was here for a little while and ended up kind of taking the lead on the team, and it just grew from there. And over the years, when I joined the team, we really didn't do too much around automation. It was all advisory and consulting. There was a decision made, a few years prior that that would be the focus. So that worked out well for a while. It helped us kind of understand what the market needed, what the region needed. But then in the last few years, we really pivoted very heavily back into the robotics space. So that's how myself and my team, we've all kind of have grown quickly together in this space.
So how do you feel your experience working in the micro manufacturing industry, helped you, or which skills like transferred across to what you do now?
I think it's very instrumental. I mean, it was a much different world, right? You learn a lot. You're you're constantly exposed to like the most advanced technologies, right? And it's also very, very demanding. So I think those two things we're able to port over very nicely, right? So kind
Mhm.
of it instills in you working in that industry a very strong work ethic, what you're doing and how you approach it. Um, and I think the fact that you're always looking at these advanced manufacturing technologies, it means that when you come back to what I would say more the real world, right, where real fabrication and real stuff happens that you can actually touch and feel, and you don't have to look at under a microscope, right? It allows you to see a lot of ways to do things that you didn't think you'd be able to do before. I think if I had grown up in this industry, my mindset would have been, my view would have been a lot narrower, right? Okay,
Mhm.
well, this is how we do it. We can work within this range, but I was working in a much different environment, and I try to use that learning all the time when I'm back here.
And what about before this, the startup and the semiconductors what were you doing before? Is your background in engineering? I would
Yeah.
assume so that you went into that. What type of engineering? Like what was it that you were gunning for as a young man?
So as a young man, I will admit that I was probably pretty aimless. Uh, and what I do, also I wanted I was a skater when I was a kid. That's all I wanted to
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
Um, right. But when I finally got into college, went to Rochester Institute of Technology, so RIT. Had a really good opportunity there to join their microelectronic engineering program, which at the time was, I think, the only one in the country that had a program really focused on the semiconductor industry.
Mhm.
And so that really kick-started the whole thing.
Yeah.
So got to there, and it was my wife and I lived down there, but as we were starting to have a family, we really wanted to move back up towards the Buffalo area.
Yeah. And yourself, as a skater, yeah, which I love. I was a BMX kid.
Ah,
I
okay,
was a freestyler, but
nice.
when in your career now, how much do you want to stay in the real world? I like how you use the term real world there. So much of what companies like EWI and CWB is perceived outside of us as being up there in the clouds. You're living up there in the clouds, you're designing, you're building, you're researching, you're creating rules and standards and codes and all these things that happen in the ether of our industry.
Sure.
But yet at some point there has to be these touch points with the real world.
Yep.
And even at that, the common perception is that when we touch point on in the real world, it's still not even the real world. It's with billion-dollar companies. It's with the big, the top five, you know, producers or suppliers or the huge multi-million dollar contracts that you're chasing down. But at the end of the day, when I look at my structure of my company, my client base from top to bottom, I would say 80% of the payers out there are small to medium companies.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that's the real world when we really talk about it. The stuff you're doing there, is this for the real world
Oh
in
yeah.
terms of that small to medium, or are we still talking that top tier? Like,
It's some of both, but the part that really gets me going is that real world stuff.
yeah,
And when I say that, I mean it. I spent one of the coolest things about being in the semiconductor industry is again just that you are literally at the forefront of the world's technology,
mhm,
right? But you're also working on stuff that you can't talk about with people outside the industry. Nobody understands what you're doing. You can't like hold apart because it's all got to be in a contained thing and it's got to be looked at under an electron microscope. And you know, you come back to this what I would call the real world, and you get to get your hands dirty. You get to work on stuff. You build stuff. You do stuff that you can help somebody figure out. And you can see how it helps
yeah.
your business. So I think this stuff is just a lot of fun. I like this a lot more, but I would say most of what we're doing is what I would call real world applications. It's going to be, something that's going to be implemented within the next 6 months to the next few years.
Yeah,
It's not 20 years out.
yeah. And walk me through the process. Let's say I'm a small business owner, and I'm going to go small. Let's say I got about 10 employees, but I'm only producing, let's say, the same 10 to 15 parts within a space.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the perfect scenario where you can start to bring in automation where there's repetition, right?
Yeah.
And now, what do they do? Do they Google EWI and say, "Hey, what's up?" How does this process start? How do you get pulled in? What does it look like?
Yeah, sure. So sometimes it is just that. It is somebody Googling or searching for us. We've definitely built up some brand recognition, so people now know to at least come to us. And we have a pretty strong sales team, right? People going out trying to find those companies that want to come in and would be good partners with us. But we have a pretty standard process once we do that. So we always start with what we call automation site assessment. So we'll go out, we'll spend a half a day or so at their site. We'll talk with all the key stakeholders. We'll do a floor walk, right? We ask a ton of questions, really try to dive into what they're doing, what the challenges are. And the whole point is that we're really trying to understand, where should they or where could they be adding new technologies, new automation, things like that. And the whole time we're trying to keep process in mind, and we're trying to keep in mind that automation is not a solution for everybody, right?
Mhm.
So if you are a really small company, as you said, 10 people, you're only making a few parts, advanced automation might not be the right way to go, right? We never
Yeah.
want to force anyone into that. So we always tell people, think about your process first, fix that process. Worst thing you want to do is have a problem with your process or your workflow, go spend tens of thousands of dollars on automation, and now it's a band-aid, right? And so we try to help people navigate all those things. Once we go through all that, we're able to come back to them with a handful of ideas, right? Here are the different things you should be looking for. Here's ways we think you could automate. Here's certain technologies we think would be a good fit. Here's companies that work in space that we can get you connected up with, all those sorts of things. And then from there, it really depends on what they want to do. We can help them navigate that, hold their hand. We can help them develop and design their first system. We can train their people on how to do all this stuff, right? It really just depends on which path they want to take at that point.
Yeah. And is there any off the shelf products
Oh, yeah.
that can be offered, like saying like, hey, we got this thing right here, we got 30 of them in a stock, you want one, it'll do X, or I guess, how does that look like or work?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I mean, as you probably know, as a nonprofit, we don't sell equipment, right?
Yeah.
So our role is to help people get connected. We love it when we find a challenge and we know that there's an exact thing we can point them to, right?
Mhm.
And usually, because their world is not to go out and research what's out there, their world is to keep their job, their business running day to day, right? There's a lot of fires to put out. So when
Yeah.
we go in and we go, oh no, we know exactly what you need. It's this product from this company. We love that, and they love that, right? Because it's an easy win. And those
Yeah.
things usually aren't all that expensive, right? They get it on the floor, they get it running, and they can see an improvement that day.
And that's another question that comes up a lot in the automation world from the public is cost. So, in my life, I remember I saw the first robot installed in a manufacturing place about 25 years ago. And it was about $3.5 million to get one. It was a big guy though; they could do 50 tons on the positioner. So this is a big robot. But um, to now, where I'm seeing cobots at FabTech going for 18 grand.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So there's been a huge swing. Now, part of that is obviously just the amount of people out there creating them. The market's, in some cases probably saturated, or there's been a lot of building. But in terms of a viable solution, even in your term at EWI, how are the costs looking like? Are these things that are like you're gonna have to you tell the customer you're gonna have to really sit down and save up for a bit before you get to this? And I know this is a broad question, but
Sure.
generally, what are you looking at? Like,
So what we tell people is if they're looking to buy their first collaborative robot, expect that the robot itself is going to be somewhere in the $30,000 to $50,000 range, right?
yeah,
Plus whatever equipment you need to go with it, rippers, weld torches, enclosures, safety equipment, all that.
mhm,
Now you are right. There are some down there that you will find in the $18,000 and even lower, and some of those are very impressive looking, right? The biggest problem you're going to have with some of those is there's probably going to be no support structure for them in the
yeah,
US or in Canada, right? And that's going to be the thing you're going to be struggling with. If they work, they're going to work great, but if there's a problem, then you're kind of stuck. But none of these are super expensive, right?
yeah,
I mean, you'll find little robots now from like literally industrial robots that can fit in the palm of your hand. They're still about $15,000, but man, they are really good robots. It's a lot different than it used to be, and it's,
mhm,
you think about these small companies, a 50,000, a 50,000 project might seem like it face value a lot of capital, but when you're talking about a company that can't find workers or can't find enough people, right? These things can pay themselves off very quickly, right?
yeah,
And the nicest thing we're seeing with the cobot side of things is most companies are looking at them as a way to augment their workflow, right? They're bringing in these cobots, but giving the employees they have a better opportunity. It's taking away some of those the most boring, dull, and dirty tasks, right? So the people that are working there can do something a little bit better. So we're seeing a lot of upside.
Well, and I think a lot of it is a societal view of, you know, or of the fantasy of robots. The science fiction up to this point, we've created kind of this fantastical view of robots and automation. Last year, I invented some, or sorry, I didn't invent. I interviewed someone from RoboMaster, and I was talking to them about automation and the idea of like the maker space
Yep.
world, the home builder world. That technology isn't legit until someone can go to Home Depot and buy it. You know, then it's for real. Now this thing has permeated our society. And the Roomba. I got that's a robot. That's a robot with sensors. That's automated and going around your house, making your floors a little cleaner with less effort. People don't seem to make that connection quite yet in the industrial space, where automation is literally around us everywhere in some way or another, but we still are tentative to think about it. I still don't know if I can go buy myself a cobot to put in my garage today. Could
You
I?
want one.
But I want one. I do. I would love to have one to play with. And if people like me or Joe Blow off the street can go to somewhere and buy a cobot for 10 grand and plug it into 110 volts in their garage and have it assist with their hobby perhaps, or their little home invention, then you have buy-in. But are we getting anywhere near that level of acceptance with the industry?
I feel like we are. I feel like it's still going to be quite some time before it will be practical for somebody to do that for home use, right? I mean, there's only so many things you can do with it if you're trying to find a purpose for it at home, right? Before it's just a toy.
A toy, yeah.
But in the industrial world, obviously, there's a ton of applications for it. But I think we are getting closer. I mean, you can go online and find small robots, that you could buy for a few $1,000s if you really wanted to do that. But to the point to where you get to where cobot people are buying it for their house, I think you're going to see other things first. You're going to see more Roomba type stuff. Right? You're going to see more purpose built, not a flexible robot that you can reprogram for things, but things that are more, you put it in your house to do one thing and it does one thing very well. I think you'll start to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, I just talked to this guy the other day. He's a software designer. He was asking me about helping him build some frames, and I said, "What do you got in that mind of yours?" And he said, "I want to have an automated wheelbarrow." And at first, I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Just imagine you just tell your wheelbarrow to get out of the garage and meet me at the front yard at 8:30 in the morning. You go mow your lawn. It's waiting for the bags. You tell it to go drop it off. Go to the dumpster. It wheels it for you there. It waits for you, and then it goes back to its little dock." I'm like, "So you're like the yard Roomba?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "You know what? That's the innovation I love to see. When you start taking these industrial applications and start applying them to the home base, and where someone with a Raspberry can get a hold of some servos or a little motor and start creating these applications that seem very simple yet are very applicable, right?"
Oh yeah, I mean you're already seeing a lot of like home automation stuff like that, right? I mean, obviously the Roomba, there's the lawnmower version of that, right? I don't know who makes that, Husqvarna maybe, right? There's those types of things. But there's a lot of home automation, a lot of things that have bled over from the industrial world in terms of all the cameras, sensors, and those different things, and people come up with amazing ways to do that stuff all the time.
Yeah. But actually, I have a note here for cameras because I had an idea in my sleep last night that I want to talk to you about. But after the break, we're going to go right now and take a quick break for our sponsors and advertisers. Make sure that they can get their word out there. And thank you for supporting us. And we'll be right back after this quick break with Matt Malloy from EWI.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back with Matt Malloy from EWI. My name is Max Ceron here at the CWB Association podcast. All right, before the break, we were talking about all the cool stuff, right? All this cool stuff that the cobots and robots. And I mean, it sounds like your job is one that would be pretty fun.
It is. It is.
You get, and it's a problem-solving type of job. But correct me if I'm wrong, but EWI really is like a problem-solving type of place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what we do. That's what I mean. It's not just me. The whole team loves this type of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Throw a challenge to us, and we're going to figure it out.
So, how do you collaborate with the other groups? How seamless is that collaboration? You got two different locations, you got two different things going on. When you're looking at welding and collaborating or automation, let's say, it sounds like kind of like the welding's over there and the automation's over here. How does that work within the structure of EWI?
It works really well now. I mean, there was definitely some growing pains earlier on, right? The site in Ohio has been there for quite a long time. The site in Buffalo has been here for like 6 or 7 years. And definitely those growing pains of, well, how do you do this stuff across two sites? You've got process experts in one place, you've got different technologies in another. I'd say right now it's very integrated, but that's because there was a really concerted effort over the past several years to make that happen. So now we've got a lot of our projects are cross-site projects or cross-site teams. I've got people on my team here and people on my team in Ohio. We have other people in the same situation. And the teams are starting to do more projects together, right? We have a lot of, we have one big project going on together jointly between our automation team and our data science team. There's things going on between the automation team and the different welding teams. So right now I'd say it's pretty seamless. And the actual physical barriers between the two sites are really not much of a problem anymore. We've got people going back and forth all the time. And then all the stuff we learned during COVID, right? So how easy it is now to do virtual meetings, and that's just changed the way we all do stuff. So it's pretty good right now.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, then we talked about. Well, I said something about cameras right before the break. I have this idea.
Okay.
Run with me here. Right?
Yeah.
So when you're working with automation, and welding, a lot of it is live welding, and I just see so much investment everywhere about how to get the robot to stay on track with the welds, because welds move, welds distort things. No two parts are ever fit up exactly the same. And I mean, in my 30 years welding, it's been from line trackers to seam trackers to heat trackers to different cameras invented that don't take the heat and all these issues. And if you look at what most modern automation is for welding, it's some type of a sensor feeding data to a computer that gives the welding machine that is automated, that moves, the information it needs to either speed up, slow down, left, right, up, down, arc length, blah 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 blah.
Sure.
Okay, so one of the biggest barriers in this is the heat itself. We look at Cavatar cameras with their laser cameras. You look at Xyrus cameras. They're all trying to figure out how to either use the heat data or get around the heat data that's coming off the weld. At some point, won't there be, and this is the question, at some point, won't there be enough data from these systems that you can just have a simple camera off enough a distance to be able to predict what the changes will be within a certain distance, so that you can cut those costs down? You don't have to be in that heat zone of the sparks and the arcs, where the camera can be further off, and now you can just predictably, from all the data of it's got to be 20 some years now we've been pulling data, that the cameras don't have to be in the fire anymore. I look at that and I think, why is that camera still right there? Don't we know enough to predict by now what's going to happen in 6 inches, or 30 centimeters, right? Am I way off? Am I just dreaming bananas here?
No, I don't think you're way off. And I think you're right. After, decades and decades of this type of work, right, we should be able to get to that place. I think there are amazing technologies coming out all the time, but what you're getting, I think, is really more on the data side, right? How do you deal with that data, make the right models?
Yeah.
One of these days, we got to get you connected up. There's a guy over here named Alex Kidd that we really got to get you connected with, who's leading some very, very amazing stuff in the data science world, where they're doing things like you're saying, right? They're able to take all of this historical data, combined with process knowledge, process expert knowledge, and really combine that to make these decisions, to give it that intuition, like you're saying, right? So
Yeah.
maybe you don't need that camera right there in that spot. Maybe maybe you can do it a different way. So I think it's coming. And I think there's actually some neat things going on here at UWI along those lines already.
Well, and that's the idea came to me because I was actually looking at a work development plan for FabTech. And when I'm developing work development plans, I always have in the back of my mind mentorship. And mentorship is kind of like the key that made humanity evolve, right? Like if there's one thing that allowed us to succeed as a species, was the ability to tell stories. One person learned something, told the story to the next person. They're either going to build on that or not do it, depending on the case. And as we evolved over millions of years, we started to create a predictability of scenarios, this intelligence, where we were able to derive information of future states from past experiences. Now, when I look at automation, this is the connection I'm trying to figure out. How do we have mentorship cross the barriers into automation? When will be, and this is all going to lead to my final question, which is I'm gearing you towards the AI conversation, right? Because at some point that needs to happen. And you got colleges around the world building and evolving.
Sure.
30 years ago, with the lack of ability, it was all, the sharing of research papers. Okay, somebody at this university came up with a theory. Everyone, let's read it, sit around it, see what we can learn from it, and derive something for whatever we're working on. Now with the internet, that information is blasted out there.
Yeah.
Right? But robots don't read. Cobots don't care. They don't think. They don't know that the robot that they just replaced 10 minutes ago on the line had this error, and it's going to reproduce that error without having any prior cognition of it. The operator's got to do that, right? So in terms of, how do you bring in previous models, previous data, previous errors, and try to have that as a working growth in the automation space?
Yeah, I think the fact that there is so much of an emphasis on data and data capture, analysis, visualization, all that sort of thing, I think it's making those things easier, right? If you look back 10 years, exactly the exact scenario you said, right? There's a good chance that nobody collected any data on it at all, right?
Yeah.
So that first robot died or something happened, they replaced it, or they made a process change or whatever. There wasn't data. The only data there was something that the engineer kept in a spreadsheet that was all manually tracked, right? Nowadays, people expect data collection, right? They want that data, whether it's for the reasons you're saying, or even if it's just for part traceability.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we are inherently making this easier going forward, because we already have that mindset of, okay, where's the data? How do we collect the data? People are thinking about that up front. So the next time somebody has that issue, it's going to be a lot easier to replace that part, replace that robot, and upload what was there before, right? And now we combine that with more of the machine learning, the deep learning, right? Where we can push it forward, we can learn from that data, we can see those trends. It just makes it even more powerful. So I think we're heading in that direction already.
And in the initial conversations you have with clients, how much data are you asking for in terms of the setup? Saying, do you have historical data of what you built, or if they don't, do you say, okay, well, we're going to need this kind of data up to a point before we can start adding in pieces?
So there's a fine line on that one, right? So we used to ask for a lot, and what we found was we were asking for a lot of information, but then at the end of the day, a lot of that information didn't end up being useful going into whatever that project was, right? So then it felt like we were just asking companies for stuff, making them jump through hoops on
Just arbitrarily, yeah.
Yeah, because we thought we needed that information. We're a lot more selective now on what we ask for, right? So we make sure if we're going to ask for information, it's information we know we're going to use on that project. Also, we realize that a lot of the companies we're working with are smaller manufacturers. They are the ones that by default usually don't have all of that data, right? Some of them don't even have drawings for certain things, right? Or they have, very, very simple drawings. They don't have 3D models. They don't have historical data on production, all that sort of thing. So sometimes you can't get it And if we do ask for it, though, we want to make sure it's something we know we're going to use.
Yeah.
But we do ask for it if we need it.
And like there's so much in this space.
Oh yeah.
When you are looking at the stuff that's happening in your shop right now, where do you see it trending? What's the biggest, I guess, positive steps forward happening on your desk right now?
I think the biggest positive things are the fact that everybody seems to be heading in the same direction, right? Before COVID, a lot of people looked at automation, looked at the stuff and said, okay, well, we think we need to do it. We want to do it. We're not quite sure yet. We're going to hold off. And then COVID happened, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody said, oh, we missed the boat. Okay, now we need this stuff. Now we need to do this. So everybody is looking at it. And most people, as I mentioned before, are adopting more of a similar mindset to what we have. We tend to look at this stuff as much as we can in like a socially conscious way, right?
Yeah.
We like when people bring this stuff in and it helps benefit the employees as much as it does the owners and the shops. So we're starting to see a lot more adoption to that too, right? Let's bring this stuff in to make the world better for everybody, not just the person who owns the company. So those are I'd say very positive trends, things we're seeing.
They are.
On the technology side, we've already obviously talked about the big one around collaborative robots, but I think we're also starting to see a lot of trends around inspection, AI around inspection, autonomous vehicles driving around doing their own thing. Those are areas we're starting to see a lot more of an uptick as well.
I just had a request. One of the association members out in the West Coast that lives in Vancouver, Portside, was asking about if there's drones that can do inspections on boats remotely, so they could just have drones go out and do hull inspections while they're still in the water.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have no idea, but geez, that sounds cool, man. Like, I mean, I would love to see. Like, those are those solutions that somebody on the floor,
Sure.
the idea pops in their head, thinking, we're lowering scaffolds off the edges of boats to check welds. There's got to be a better way with
Sure.
today's technology, and it's like, yes, 100%. There's got to be.
It was funny to say, because I was literally having a conversation on that same exact topic this morning with someone about ships, right? About ways that you could use drones and other technology to scan.
Well, I did tell them to call EWI, so maybe.
No, but it's just funny how this stuff comes up, right? Because one thing leads to the next, and it's like, well, we know we can use it for this. Well, if a kid can use a drone to go and survey whatever he wants, why couldn't we use that same drone to survey the side of a ship? Right? They're already being used in warehouses to survey what's going on, what's up on the shelves. It just seems like a natural fit to start adding this stuff in.
Does drones and that type of vehicle, or any types of different types of vehicles, do they fall under your scope of automation?
They probably could.
Should they?
Yeah. Do we want to be practical or fun? And that's the problem. They could, but there's so much stuff that we could be working on. We've had to really try to narrow down our focus over the last couple of years. So no, unfortunately, they don't.
I guess when we're talking about priorities earlier, it's like that's the tricky part. There's not an unlimited number of space, money, or people, right? So
exactly, and that's what it all comes down to. But would the team love to do it? Oh yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the projects you're working on now? I mean, I'm sure there's always the classified status of stuff, but
Sure.
just roughly.
So right now we're working on a few projects. We're working on one that's kind of a material handling project. So it's a company that makes they're like rolls of material, right? So helping them take them from one part of their line through packaging, getting that all done. There's another one we're working on that's more like machine tending, right? But tending, I don't know if you've ever seen like metal spinning processes. You're familiar with those. So so automating some of that. A lot of stuff around tele-welding. So
That's
getting that
thing,
prepped.
eh?
Yeah, we're getting that all. We have projects going on for that, and we're also getting it prepped for Fab Tech. We're gonna have a live demo, so people come in and do some live tele-welding. That'll be fun. In midst of all that, we're testing out some new technologies from some different companies. So there's always something neat going on. And that
sounds awesome.
That's just in our area. There's obviously each of the different areas EWI has. Just it amazes me when I sit back and think about all the stuff we're working on.
So telewelding's come up lots. I've been hearing it. I've been seeing it. There's not a lot of players in that market yet. Um, as things, I just watched Oppenheimer, so it's like there's always someone coming up on you,
I
right?
haven't
But
seen it yet. We got to. My
so
kids and
good.
I want to watch it.
So good, so good.
Yeah.
But it's very much a discussion about A, social responsibility, and B, the process and competitiveness of an innovation. Which I think is something that really makes or breaks industries. If you're not innovative or always got the foot on innovation, you find yourself falling behind suddenly and quickly.
Yeah.
So but when you're looking at telewelding, what is it that has changed in the last 3 to 5 years that suddenly made it so important? Whereas, 5 years ago, I think we probably had the same technologies to kind of make it happen, but it was like, meh, was it COVID or what was it that really pushed that over the ledge?
Workforce.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's very much a workforce thing, right? And it's a combination of a bunch of stuff, right? You think about it, most of the world that does, if you have an office job, a desk job, you can do that stuff remote, right? You can't really work remote if you're in a fab shop or,
Mhm.
manufacturing or shipyard or something like that, right? You've got to be there. And if we can make things easier for people so that they can do it from a remote location, even if it's just they don't have to be crouched down underneath a part, right? Hot, sweating, uncomfortable, but they can do the same type of thing. It just makes it better for everybody. So I think the combination of workforce challenges and people just simply expecting something different, right? People expect better environments now, better working conditions. I think
Mhm.
those are some really big reasons why we're seeing such a push, just to do this. How do we augment the workforce? How do we extend the workforce? How do we address these challenges? So I think that's why we're seeing so much interest in this technology now. And I think the other thing is, you're right. Maybe 5 years ago, the core technologies that would have gone into a solution were there, but nobody had pieced them together yet.
Yeah.
And I think now that we're getting closer to that, and we have some really good good real life examples, we're showing it off in welding and grinding and art
Mhm.
gouging, all these things that people don't want to, I shouldn't say people don't want to weld. People don't want to art gouge. People don't want to grind, right? Those are very uncomfortable jobs, right? And now that we're showing that, hey, this is real, we can show you a real application for this. I think people are just getting much, much more excited and interested. They know it's a reality now.
So that it's you brought up what grinding and gouging because that was going to be my next question. In a telewelding scenario, and for people, I guess, that don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
Telewelding is that you have a machine that's going to basically mimic what you're telling it to do in a different location
yeah,
on site. You're not. Doesn't mean you're in Korea. It means like you could just be in the next room or just 20 feet over, but it's basically an extension of yourself, right?
yes. Oh, exactly. Yeah. So the whole idea is, you know, you can do something manually, right? You could weld manually, or you could do a fully automated welding process, right? If we just stick with
Mhm.
welding as the application for now.
Yeah.
But to go to a fully automated welding process for something that's fairly, like, say, complicated welds, that's a huge expense, right? There's a lot of development. There's a lot of technology that has to go into that. There's a lot of risk. But if you can do what we like to say, keep the human in the loop, right? You use the technology for what it's good for, but you allow the person to direct it. That's telemanufacturing, telewelding. And even more so is when you have haptic feedback. So everybody's familiar with, like, your phone or Xbox game controller, something that's going to vibrate, you feel it, right? We have the same, you can do the same thing with industrial devices. It's just a much more powerful haptic feedback. So if you're doing it right, you might be welding in another room or the other side of the country with this robot, but to you, it feels like you're actually standing right there holding the weld torch, right?
Mhm.
You're getting that feedback as if you were right there. The only thing we haven't figured out yet is how to pump in the fumes, right? So if we can,
Well, the smell is a big part, man.
I
You know a
know,
lot about your weld from the smell, and it's hard to explain that to people until they've welded for a while. It's like, I last night someone in my neighborhood was running a zip disk to cut siding, and I could tell. I told my wife, "Oh, someone's using a zip disk to cut some siding down the street." She's like, "How do you know that?" It's like, you're just in the industry long enough, and you know the tool, you know the sound, you know what that motor sounds like, well, you know
yeah,
what that disc sounds like, and I think that might be the fear of having the telemanufacturing, telewelding is like, how much of the personal experience that I draw upon in this process will I be able to convey through whatever haptic feedback I'm getting,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And I think it'll be pretty high. You'll be able to convey most of that, and you'll be able to feel most of that. the technology still has a ways to go, right? There's
Yeah.
still, it's still, being developed. But I could say from someone who doesn't weld, right, who doesn't have that background, I've been really impressed with how this technology works. I mean, I've been really impressed with how automated welding in general works,
Hmm.
right? I mean, if I try welding something, it looks terrible, right? but I can pick it up.
We can
really
work on that.
quickly.
We can work on that.
Yeah, I don't have I don't have very many good welding stories. So it's but it's just what you can do with these robots and cobots to make them weld, and then when you can sit there and have it do part of the work that you're directing it, it's amazing how that feel you get from this thing.
Now, is telewelding still at this point a static operation where there's a base and it's mounted, or am I rolling in a thing to like? Could this be a repair service thing? Could this be a dangerous location? The oil rupture. Can't put nobody in there. Let's send in,
Sure.
on a trolley this thing to do the work with cameras. Are we there yet? Are we getting there?
Yeah, we're getting there. We've got projects going on where it's that kind of getting closer to mobile, which is I think exactly what you're getting at right there. And if you can put it on a mobile device, a rail, or something like that, a carriage, and you can start to move it in. Eventually, I'm sure it'll be on top of autonomous vehicles and things that can drive themselves around, and then find what they need to weld and get the process going.
And with telewelding, is there also telegrinding that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
on the same machine though? Or do you have to switch out machines, or does it have like a head that can flip around? Or
You could use what's called a tool changer, right? So you
Mhm.
could have that on there and swap back and forth between the heads or whatever you want to do, from a weld torch to a grinder to whatever you need to do. So we haven't done that yet. We have the equipment here to do it, but we haven't gotten that far yet.
So for all the welders that are listening and you're not a good welder and you spend a lot of time grinding, don't worry. You can totally replicate what you're doing now with the telewelding and still spend your day grinding.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I'm guessing most of those people would configure the system to just do grinding, right? Like, let's focus on the grinding, and that's it's funny because it started off at least here with a huge focus on welding, but over time we hear so much interest on the material removal side.
Absolutely.
Right? That grinding, art gouging, those are the things that people are coming to us and saying, okay, like how can we make this work too? Because these are jobs that people just don't, it's uncomfortable, right? I
Well,
just think
and the removal of the steel is still a critical precision part.
yeah.
There is a very valuable aspect to gouging and grinding things
Oh yeah.
properly, to the right depth, to the right heats, depending on the alloys. You really got to watch those things. And it kind of got ignored. It was like, oh, grinding's just for mistakes. It's like, well, not really. There's a lot of things that go on.
For me, it's for mistakes.
I mean, I've heard of grinders in my welding career. I've never really seen one up close, but no,
There you go.
I got like 6 in my garage, so each with a different disc, so I don't have to switch them out. But
Oh, nice. Nice. That's always the worst part. You lose the little tool to swap the disc, and then you're stuck.
I'm old school. I don't need the tool. I got strong hands. I can rip it off of there.
Oh,
I don't even know where my tool is. I haven't used one in years. I don't know.
oh man,
You start getting those welding muscles. We always talk about them. So
I guess so.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
have those.
So what's up? We're getting close to the end of the interview. What's up for you, Matt, in terms of, you've been with the company how long now?
About 4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Yeah.
So what do you see on your horizon within EWI?
So I see what we're doing continuing to grow. We've got, the next few years, I think we have a lot going on around the small and medium manufacturer side of things. We have a huge program, right, dedicated to that area. I think that's going to continue to grow. I think our team is going to continue to make more of a name for ourselves in this space, especially around the cobot technology, right? We're already gaining a lot of attention in what we're working on. So I see that being the biggest thing. But the other 50% is really, as this is evolving, so is the rest of the company. We're in the process of developing, a new, broader automation strategy for the company. Historically, people didn't think of EWI as an automation organization, right? I mean, we didn't even talk about ourselves as an automation organization, even though automation is a huge part of what we do. So now we're really trying to put that strategy and that program together to say, no, this is what we do. This is how we can help. We can help you solve your challenges, help you develop new technologies, all that sort of thing. So I think my role over the next few years is going to be a combination of pushing forward the programs we're working on, and growing this new strategy we've been developing.
And then in the next month here, in 6 weeks, we're going to be at FabTech.
Yeah.
What's and I'm going to be talking to my staff to make sure this gets released, either the week before or during FabTech. So what can people expect to see from the EWI/CWB booth at FabTech?
Yeah, so there's quite a few papers and presentations, so that'll be great. But the big thing is we will be for the first time showing off the live, telemanufacturing demos. So in the past, it shows we've had cells there, a small robot doing it. This time, it's going to be live. It's actually going to be kind of an interesting concept. We're still working through the logistics of this whole thing, but we'll have 2 booths. So if you come to the CWB EWI booth, you'll see all the normal stuff that we're showing across the companies, and you'll see the control center for the telewelding cell. We have another booth at the other side of the same hall where the actual welding is going to be taking place. So as you're controlling and welding in one booth, that welding is happening, a couple hundred meters away, or wherever that might, however far that distance is. So you'll be able to weld there, go over to the other side and see what you weld. You'll be able to watch it real time as you're doing it, but knowing that you're literally controlling this robot on the other side of the hall in real time. So this is the first time we've tried to do this with a live crowd and with live welding. So this for us, this will be a big one.
We'll have to set up a time for me and the staff to get there so I can do a little bit of welding.
Oh yeah,
and I'll position one of the other staff members at the other side so they can get it on their phone at the same time, and we could do a little content for the online. That'd be super fun.
Great. Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, no, that'll be a blast. Well, we're going to be down there with our podcast booth too. I already got 2 people from EWI booked for the podcast down there too, so we're going to have lots of fun doing lots of stuff, and it'll be good. Last question to round this out, or maybe 1.5 questions. We'll see where it goes. But with the what's the word that we've been using for the combination of our 2 companies, affiliation.
Oh, the affiliation.
Yeah, with the affiliation of CWB Group and EWI, that made some waves. I got a lot of phone calls when that went through last year, and I got a lot of friends down in the States and different organizations, let's say, that were also interested in EWI, and we kind of came out on top there. But from your end, from what you see of CWB Group and and us working together now, what do you see are the biggest benefits to both EWI and possibly your clients?
I would say probably the different mindset in what we do and what our client bases are, right? We tend to have EWI tends to have a smaller number of larger clients. You guys have a much broader range of clients. So I think that helps, right? And our teams look at things a bit differently. So I think that helps. I think the one thing we've got going for us is the folks on both sides are very good to work with. Like we've had quite a few people from CWB come down, visit different events. You guys are fun. So
well, we are Canadians, like
that's right. So I think it's just everybody kind of hit it off well, right? And so I think as we're learning to work together, right? There's still a big learning curve as we figure out, okay, how do these 2 organizations work together? What are those opportunities? When we find an idea that we jointly think is a good idea, how do we start developing that technology? But I think we're starting to feed off of each other, right? We're starting to say, okay, well, I've seen this, we can do this. You guys should do this. So I think we're really starting to just hit that sweet spot where it's starting to click.
And for your clients, what do you see as an offering for both sides? We have I would say a massive client base,
Yes.
CWB. We're probably pushing close to 100,000 with members and clients.
Yeah.
That opens up obviously books for you guys, say
Sure.
like right. But now what is it that you hope to offer our clients here in Canada?
So I think the biggest thing is more on the research side, right? So it seems that over time, CWB has been more, you've been more on the standards, the training, what do companies need to get in place now?
Yeah.
EWI has been more future looking, right? How do we develop something that's going to be used in 5 years or however far out? I think what we have to offer is more on the research side. And I think a lot of this around automation, especially because it is becoming more of a near-term thing, right? Yeah. So these are things that you'll be able to offer to your clients, as services or support, project support, development support, those types of things to help them really figure out, okay, how do we how do we do the research and development required to solve these challenges in the next 6 months, in the next year? So I think that's an area where I think, EWI could really offer some strong value to CWB's clients.
No, I love that, and it's something that it was asked of me, right? It's asked of me. It's like, what does EWI bring? And it's, those are the exact same sentiments I said. It's like, you got to look at the way these companies are structured in the client base. We did two different jobs on the same thread, or different spokes of the same wheel. It only makes sense to kind of bring them together for really to support each other. From our end, we look at EWI as being this great company, and personally speaking, that it opens up more avenues for conversation. So much of what we do on the membership side, the association side, has to do with networking and connecting the dots. Like, we have these companies, we have these people, we have these agencies, we have this. We're around the world, we're doing all these things. Let's connect some dots here and make everyone happy. And I think having someone close to your chest like EWI is just a much closer dot to connect now. It's like, well, here,
Oh yeah,
this is right there. We know them, we trust them. Go there and see what happens, right?
yeah. Especially if one of your clients is looking to say, okay, well, we need to do X, Y, and Z today, but hey, could you help us figure out who can help develop this thing we need for tomorrow, right? Then I think between the two organizations, we can cover both of those.
Awesome. Well, is there any last things you'd like to talk about? Anything coming up on the calendar? Anything interesting that you'd like to let the people know about EWI or yourself?
No, I guess come check us out at FabTech. Nothing else I could think of. I thought you were going to pick on me for not being a welder. So I was all ready, but no.
I got lots of people on the show that aren't welders. Lots of engineers come on here.
Yeah, I will say I have a much better appreciation for welding in general since I started EWI. Right, I just, not having that background before. Now I see the value. I see like how difficult, how much of it, the art and science aspect of it. A ton of recognition just for the folks that make this stuff happen. So now I'm just wishing I had a welding background.
Well, like I said, there's always time. We can get you a welder, and I'll come visit, and I'll do a welding class for you. Maybe whoever you have for staff there, we can run some plates.
Perfect. Let's do it.
And I was going to ask you about AI, but I didn't want to. I figured if I go down that path, that's another hour, and we might have to rebook another show, because we touched on machine learning, and I mean, but that's really the next step where automation gets for real, right? It's like, well, now the machine's telling us what to do, which is a whole different game.
Yeah.
Awesome, Mitchell. Matt. I really appreciate you taking the time here. And any shout outs that you'd like to say hi to somebody?
Just hello to the team. We have an awesome team here. Hello, and thank you for everything you guys do.
Awesome. Well, everybody, make sure that you check out the booths. We're all going to be down there having fun at FabTech down in Chicago, which is the 11th to the 14th of September. We got lots of stuff coming up. I know that we're looking at different videos that we can produce, different marketing content, different how-to videos, and we want to really make sure that people understand what the businesses are for both sides and how they integrate. So that's going to be coming up in the next few months, and make sure you stay tuned to the podcast as well. Matt, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Max. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, stay tuned for the next episode. We'll see you there. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the show.